Thank you, everyone, for being at today's work session. Really excited to hear about the study for Fayetteville Street and downtown. This is really important discussion, and can't wait to hear from y'all. So let's go. Let's do it.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. I will be turning the podium over to Bill King with DRA really quickly, but just in the way of a quick reminder about this study. So this was one of the first items that the council chose to fund out of ARPA funds, making a commitment to investing in downtown and seeing some improvements be made. And so it took us a little while to get there, some administrative things that we learned along the way, but very happy to be able to have this presentation before you. So without further ado, I'll bring up Bill King to introduce this item.
All right, thank you all so much. Bill King, Downtown Raleigh Alliance, and I'll keep my remarks brief. Thank you all so much for the time. Thank you for the interest in this. And so just a little bit of backstory. Obviously, Downtown Raleigh over the years has had several big planning efforts, going back to 2005 with the Livable Streets Plan, which helped lead to the reopening of Fayetteville Street and the Convention Center, then in 2015 with the Downtown Experience Plan. Obviously, the world changed a lot in 2020 for downtown, and given that and just the time that's passed since the last plan, we felt like we needed a new strategy for downtown's economy that reflects the existing realities, it reflects changes in how people work, how people experience places, and new needs we have. So we engaged Interface Studio, and we've started this work last year. They've done a tremendous amount of analysis, which Scott's going to walk you through. So we're excited about this. A reminder that this is just the first portion of this. So we did bifurcate this where this portion of the study comes to you now. There's some urgency in getting our downtown core back into an elevated place. But then we'll be coming back to you later this year with 3 more chapters as well that focus on other elements of downtown. So this is not the only part of this study, it's just the first part of it. So thank you guys so much for your time and your thoughtfulness in engaging us on this. And without further ado, I'll introduce Scott to take us through the presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me. So I'm Scott Page, Principal of Interface Studio. We do a lot of this planning and design work in downtowns across the country, both in cities that are larger than Raleigh and cities that are smaller than Raleigh. So I want to just take you through the work that we've done to date so that we can open this up for discussion and get your feedback and guidance as we continue to develop the ideas. As Bill and Evan both mentioned, this is the first part of a multi-part study. So here we're looking at Fayetteville Street and surrounding streets. Sometimes I will say Fayetteville Street, but really what I mean is Fayetteville Street, Wilmington, Salisbury, the downtown, the original downtown core. So if I say Fayetteville Street, it's usually just shorthand. Other parts of this work that are coming is a fuller retail strategy for all of downtown. Right now, we're just going to share the retail strategy that's more specific to Fayetteville Street and the surrounding streets. We'll be looking specifically at the office market. That work is in progress, as well as opportunities for supporting minority and women-owned business enterprises throughout downtown. And then eventually where this leads is that we identify a number of catalytic projects that are across all of these different parts of the study to say, okay, what's most important for downtown? What's most important for the downtown core? What do we as a city believe we need to invest in and invest in sooner than later? Okay. I don't have to really go through the schedule. As you said, this is the first part of the study. We're about halfway through the total schedule, but so much of the upfront work has been in the analysis, in the engagement, in really trying to connect with members of the community and business owners and others to understand what's on their mind about the future of downtown. With respect to engagement, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel here. DRA does an annual survey that gets 1,000+ responses. There was a downtown plan for Raleigh many years ago that had quite a bit of engagement. This is really, in our minds, a fine-tuning in light of the pandemic and in light of the challenges and opportunities that downtown faces today. So we did have a few pop-up meetings, excuse me, some public meetings that also included an online survey, which actually generated a lot of great ideas and a lot of great debate. We had a number of responses to a business survey so we could connect specifically with business owners. We've had a number of discussions with property owners and residents, a number of interviews and focus groups. So we really are trying to reach out as broadly as possible and make sure that we're hearing from everybody that cares deeply about downtown. With respect to who did participate, this is one of the things that we're really pleased about. When we do this kind of work in a downtown, we want to make sure we're getting a good mix of folks that care about downtown broadly, whether they live in downtown or not, but then also a large proportion of folks that live downtown. And so that's important for us. We're really pleased with the results of at least who is participating in the work so far. And we are able to cut the data based upon where people live, what their affiliation is, which helped us learn a lot about whether you're a resident or just someone that visits downtown on occasion, the similar things that you might care about or the things that are different. One of the things that did come out of the public work that we did, and I think this is really instructive, we had asked folks, we gave them a large range of ideas and also offered for people to please write in their own ideas. What's most important to make Fayetteville Street more vibrant? And you can see by the responses here, obviously from left to right, where we had the most responses all the way down to the least. But generally speaking, there's a lot of support for ramping up the landscaping, making Fayetteville feel more green, bringing more lighting so that there's a better nighttime presence, more outdoor dining, and more activity. So not just the big events, but the small events too, the day-to-day programming, the week-to-week programming. So we learn a lot from this kind of activity and this kind of engagement. And so now I just want to jump into where we are today, which is how do we begin to activate Fayetteville Street? What are some of the key things that we're thinking about?
On the thumbs down, what did that mean? I saw
sorry.
thumbs up. I assume it's what people want.
Excuse me. So we had some pictures for most of these, not the right answers, obviously. So we had a picture of, say, outdoor dining. And 135 people were like, that's absolutely what we want. And we did, I think, limit some of those responses, so you couldn't just choose everything. So about 135 people said, absolutely, that's what we want. And there were 7 people that were like, no, not so much. Where possible, we tried to get some feedback. So why is it that that's something that you might be concerned about?
Thank you.
But you get a good mix from that. Exactly. Okay, so jumping in, one of the things we learned about Fayetteville Street and the surrounding streets, the downtown core, is that it is very isolated. There's a number of factors: large streets, fast-moving traffic, rail lines, the location of parking lots and garages that effectively isolate the downtown core from the rest of downtown, which has seen a lot of investment and growth. So when we think about the downtown core, we're always thinking about, okay, well, how do we better connect to places like Shaw University, Dix Park, other locations? That becomes a real critical aspect of this. There's also then the nature of how Fayetteville Street looks today. We took all of these pictures on Fayetteville Street on one of our visits here, and then compared that to all of the pictures we took of streets near Fayetteville Street. So Wilmington, Hargett, other parts of downtown, you can see how different they feel. More colorful, more vibrant, more welcoming. So there's this recognition that when folks are talking about the need for more activity and for Fayetteville to feel more welcoming, some of that has to do with how it physically looks and feels and how we've managed it over time. We also noticed that Fayetteville Street and the surrounding streets are not really one characteristic. You really kind of think of it as different personalities. So the area towards the top around Martin and Hargett really have more of the concentrations of retail, restaurants. It's where the older buildings still remain. There's a different feel and a different set of opportunities than if you move a little bit to the south where there's a little bit more housing, and you can see that on the street. You can see the apartments nearby. And then you get to the bottom of the street where we have a number of major destinations that we're really calling an arts and entertainment district, but I think it needs a push to feel like an arts and entertainment district on more of a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, there's also City Market, which is a draw in and of itself. Of course, it's privately owned, but we have had a conversation with the owner and shared some of the ideas that we talked about, that we're going to be talking about today.
I hope you've had better luck than I have.
So when it turns out, where we get to with this is, again, we're not trying to reconceive of a vision for all of downtown, but we are asking some key questions is, what is it we're really trying to achieve here, particularly on Fayetteville Street and the downtown core? So there's a few things that have come up time and time again that we wanted to share. One of them is to really think of this area as North Carolina's Main Street. So recognizing that North Carolina has unique businesses, unique restaurants, this should be the place where they are showcased, and that we are really trying to market the core of downtown as a representation of all that's good about North Carolina. We also want to make sure that the core is vibrant and active. It needs to support those existing businesses. So that's something that's really important to us, and we heard it loud and clear from existing business owners that they're really looking for support and additional investment to make sure that their presence is valued and can expand. Fayetteville Street, we think of this as an opportunity to really create more of a linear park in downtown, in part because of its wide sidewalks. It already has a pretty good tree canopy. It's easier to do things on Fayetteville Street than it is on other streets because those sidewalks are so large. So we should take advantage of those opportunities. I mentioned connectivity. How do we connect beyond the downtown core to all of these other amenities in and around downtown? And then fundamentally, for all of this, is how do we create a downtown for all, right? Where families and kids want to come back time and time again, that welcomes visitors, that's really a beacon of civic pride and is inclusive of all backgrounds. So all things that are embedded in our thinking, which really leads to these 10 big ideas for Fayetteville Street, and again, Fayetteville Street and surrounding streets. The 10 ideas does come from something you all did many years ago. You had a 5 and 5, 5 ideas in 5 years, right? So we pumped it up to 10, at least for this area, and we wanted to share this as an initial step towards really thinking through how we begin to transform this area to meet the goals and the ideas that people have provided to us. So I'm going to go through each of these. I will go through some quicker than others, and of course come back and have discussion about any of these elements. Some of them are about physical improvements. Some of them are about policy and how the street operates and functions. Some are about development. So there's a mix of things embedded in here, and we're trying to understand and really bring together all of these different opportunities as we think about the future of this area. All right, let's start with number 1. So I just mentioned this is specific to Fayetteville Street. So this is one of the few recommendations that really is focused on the street itself and the opportunities that it presents. But I mentioned earlier that Fayetteville Street has these really wide sidewalks. This quote is direct from one of the engagement meetings that we did. And we agree, it's about a 30-foot wide sidewalk, give or take. But the problem is we've designed ourselves into a corner. The placement of all of the existing furniture and the planters makes it really hard to do something as simple as outdoor dining, to activate the street in creative ways. I think in some ways the original design was really trying to bring about more activity to Fayetteville Street once we opened the street from being closed to traffic. And then the resulting design didn't quite allow us all of the opportunities that we wanted. So this is the opportunity for us to unravel this a little bit more and think about the street a little differently. So if all of these spaces are too small to really support programs, the first step for us is to remove some of those elements that get in the way. So some of those planters, some of the benches, some of the things that make it difficult to really activate the sidewalk. After doing so, we can identify a few zones. New landscaping, particularly around the existing trees, new landscaping between the parking and the sidewalk, or sort of on that zone. Also amenities at the corner that would include seating and bike parking and other kinds of things. And then we have the opportunity to then use the spaces in between to support existing businesses. So whether that's outdoor dining or outdoor workspace or outdoor play space, including games, we have a number of images that show different variations on how the street can be used. And that's important because obviously, as much as we want to see more restaurants and more outdoor dining on Fayetteville, it's not really the best fit for every building. And a lot of buildings have existing uses, and we want to support those uses as well. So there's like 10 of these drawings. It's actually supposed to be flipping right now, but I think the format of the document doesn't allow us to do that. But they're contained within the report that we submitted. And the intent is that there is lots of flexibility here where this becomes a partnership between the city, DRA, business owners to really activate this street and really bring the life that folks are looking for to it. Because ultimately, I think when we were talking with people about what they hoped for, they were thinking of places like this, places that are greener, places that are more active, that you want to come back to at different times of the week and different times of the year. Yes, please.
How many of the businesses along Fayetteville Street would be willing to participate in something like this? Do you guys have a number, like how many you spoke to and how many were like, yeah, we definitely want to do that?
Not yet is the short answer. I don't know how many. Okay. I think there's a big question here in terms of how we take an idea and then operationalize it. Because you're absolutely right. There's going to be some businesses who I am sure will say, I would absolutely love to use the space in front of my store, whether it's for outdoor dining or if it's a different kind of business. That's something I might be really interested in doing. There may be others, or there's also some storefronts that are empty that raises a different question, which are, where do we step in as the city or DRA or other partners to integrate some programming, or are there other options? So it's a really important question, and it's one of the things we need to get into the weeds of to take this into an actual implementation step. The other component to Fayetteville Street, beyond what I've just talked about, really has to do with lighting. Both lighting over the street, both lighting of the historic buildings. This was something that really received a lot of support, and we got quite an earful from quite a number of folks. But this would be the opportunity, certainly, to create a better nighttime presence and to create a better front door, particularly for those that are visiting Raleigh for the first time. They might be here for a convention, and they're walking out on the street to find dinner. This would be something that we would really advocate for. Okay, so what that enables us is to begin to rethink the streetscape and rethink how it's used, which again, brings additional activity, additional color. I think part of what we've been suggesting too is to loosen up. If we can do color and public art and raised crosswalks and other fun things on surrounding streets, that should be something that's available to us on Fayetteville Street. We just need to create some very clear guidelines on the expectations, given that this is such an important civic street for the city. All right, let's go to number 2, which is looking at the foundational quality of what downtown needs to be, which is we need to ensure that it's clean, safe, and vibrant. So there's a couple components to this, and this really gets to more of the policy end of questions. There's a real need, we think, to coordinate the maintenance of the public realm. So what this graphic shows are all of the different entities that have some level of participation in the management or cleaning of downtown, in the downtown core. If I did this drawing in a different city, some of the other cities we work for, the drawing would be a lot simpler. There'd really be about 2 entities. So I think there's some need to think about how this work is coordinated, and then also to appoint someone that is coordinating these efforts as the kind of downtown liaison for this work. It's easy for things to get lost in the shuffle when there's a lot of hands there, right? So that becomes something that's important, and it's certainly something that we heard from quite a few business owners about the need to continually upgrade and maintain the public environment on Fayetteville and surrounding streets. There are some other PR things we'd want to talk about. A PR strategy in particular, too many of the bad stories about downtown are the things that find themselves on the news. Not enough of the good stories do, and that is not a Raleigh problem. That is a universal city downtown problem, particularly in this day and age. So I think there's, with the excitement and a lot of the work that's going into efforts like this, these should be the basis for thinking about how we're going to promote downtown, the good things about downtown, and the positive steps that it's taking. Also, differently on a policy end, we'd be thinking about parking. So one of the things that a lot of downtowns have been doing is thinking very carefully about their parking policy. We think there's some room to think about how we can offer 2-hour free parking for customers, how we can offer some changes to how the on-street parking is managed, but then also ways to expand things like the small business parking program. So all for consideration, but really what we're trying to do is just roll out the red carpet for everybody as effectively as possible. Because in this day and age, unfortunately, particularly as some downtowns have struggled to fully recover from the pandemic, particularly the cores of their downtowns, they need to reduce even perceived barriers about what it would take to come and shop and support local businesses. Okay, number 3. Raleigh has one of the things that I can't think of a single other city as having, which is the advantage of all of these kid-friendly amenities in their downtown, right? From the state museums to Freedom Park to the Marbles to even City Market, Moore Square, particularly when it's programmed. All of these things are real draws for families with kids that they feel disconnected. So one of the things we're really interested in is trying to create an itinerary where folks can come downtown and experience multiple of these events. So instead of having a family come down and maybe go to Marbles and then get in the car and go home, really the idea is to try to keep them in downtown as long as possible and think of the streets and Moore Square and other places as opportunities for play. So if we look at this through the lens of what would a family with kids want in their downtown, there are some simple ways we think we could activate streets, Moore Square, even potentially grounds around the Capitol should the state be willing to participate and come along, in this idea to really begin to connect these amenities and make this the family-friendly downtown that it already is, but it could be so much more. These are just some examples of different ways that you can begin to actually implement that on the street, whether it's through wayfinding, different kinds of opportunities for play, public art. All of these make a big difference. For number 4, we talk a lot about the downtown core. I had mentioned this idea that, what if we turn this into really the best of North Carolina or North Carolina's Main Street? There's a number of ways we'd need to do that. Some of that is about the kinds of restaurants and retailers we'd want to go out and recruit for empty and available spaces. Some of that has to do with marketing. How are we positioning downtown? If we begin to talk about it in this way, it becomes more of an advantage in terms of recruiting local North Carolina businesses and Raleigh businesses to come to this core of downtown because they recognize the marketing supports their business. There are some questions, though, here around some of the existing spaces that exist. You have some old spaces in downtown. Some of them are really big. Even if they're not big, they can be costly to transition for another use or another business. Some of your programs are great, but they're only for businesses. It would be better if they also applied to property owners so that they could make those improvements and then recruit the businesses as the spaces are ready. So I think there's a real question here around the kinds of incentives we as a city want to offer, and recognizing, of course, this is just one part of all of Raleigh. So this one part has some unique challenges, but there are some real financial considerations here in how we take some of these older buildings and make them suitable for a broader range of businesses, which makes them that much easier to fill. Related to that, this study, we do talk about the opportunity for some vending carts or mobile retail within downtown, mostly to fill the gaps. We don't really have an interest in doing this in front of an active business. We'd rather do it somewhere in downtown where the only thing on that street is a parking garage, and we're trying to fill a gap between a block that's pretty active and another block that's pretty active and something in between that's just not, because that's how we can get people to walk around downtown more. And then we talk about other things around things like a downtown gift card program. There are some simple initiatives that actually aren't even necessarily city initiatives, but can be initiatives that partners take to bring businesses together and promote themselves, as well as making sure that folks recognize there are some real unique things you can do downtown that you can't do in other locations. So that's what the marketing should really help to target. All right, I'm moving quickly. On City Market, there's a number of things. So Bobby from And Access is our retail specialist. He's been talking to a lot of business owners in downtown. So a lot of these business strategies are really coming from his experience in working with businesses in different cities. And he looked at City Market and he said, there's already kind of a unique brand here. The physical nature of City Market is really, really interesting. And he looked specifically at Market Hall as this potential event space and restaurant concept, and really thinking of City Market as grounded in kind of local food and really promoting that as a downtown center for those activities. So we recognize, again, that this is a privately owned space, but these are the kinds of ideas we want to continue to push, because we need to say something in this document, given that City Market is so important. And we certainly want to do this with the property owner, and make sure that their mission and the mission of this downtown and what you all would like to achieve are aligned. The fifth aspect here is really celebrating Raleigh's Black Business District. Bobby did quite a bit of historical research on Raleigh and where Black businesses had historically been, where they were relegated to. Certainly Hargett Street plays a big role, but not just Hargett Street. There are a number of streets throughout downtown where there was a clear presence of Black-owned businesses. So something that he and our team are very interested in is installing public art, and there's already some on the street that does recognize some of those aspects to really highlight that history within Raleigh, but also more stories and tours, not just about historical Black-owned businesses, but also modern-day ones. And one of the key opportunities is that on Exchange Plaza, which is connected to Fayetteville Street, we do think there's an opportunity to bring in some small permanent stalls for small businesses. So one of the things that can be a real deterrent if you're a small business just starting out is to find space that you can use in downtown at your price point. Sometimes a smaller stall like this offers a step into the market so that you can prove your business, and then when you're ready, you can move into a bigger storefront when your sales are there to enable you to do so. So we're really trying to diversify the retail spaces within downtown so that we can offer more opportunities for more people of all backgrounds. And of course, connecting with things like the South Park Heritage Walk, things that you are already working on, connected down to Shaw University and other locations, are really, really critical, and that's something that we continue to promote here. Number 6 is a little bit more development-oriented. One of the things that you will see in rankings of cities and how they've recovered post-pandemic is that the ones that recover the fastest have more housing in their downtown. So the more housing that we have, the more resilient we are as a downtown to any other further shocks in the future, right? So if office workers come back slowly, we would have more customers downtown to support more businesses. So when you look at this map, and this is one of these maps that were really interesting for us, and I kind of squint at this map. This is what I tell my students to do too, if you're doing a map like this. I would look at it and I would say squint at it, and all the yellow colored in buildings are the existing residential. So what that means is you've already built in a lot of residential, which thankfully you did before the pandemic, because otherwise the fall could have been that much worse. So you've built in this residential, but right now it's very point loaded, right? Do you walk out of your building and walk next door and know who your neighbor is? Next door might be a parking garage or an office building. So the opportunity would be to fill in more housing over time to bring more residents to the core and make downtown feel even more like a neighborhood. So what else is on this map are a number of sites that have already been proposed for housing in the past few years, projects that we were aware of. And then we've outlined a number of sites that we've just called loosely housing opportunities. Some of them are parking lots that are really undervalued and underutilized for downtown. Others are office buildings that are largely empty or publicly owned. The question of whether office buildings are suitable for conversion requires a lot more study. And that is something we have seen in a lot of cities across the country. The big question first is the floor plate the right size so that you can take office and transition it to housing? The second big question is how was it built? Where's the water and sewer and all of that stuff in the building? So at this point, we're saying, look, it's really important for us to push forward and push as much as we can to get more housing in the core. Whether we can rehab some of these older office buildings into housing is a question to be determined. We can come back to this. For number 7, one of the, again, related to Fayetteville Street, we talked about how Fayetteville Street could be more active. Well, one of the unique things about Fayetteville Street itself is that there are all these side alleyways, passages, right, that connect it to the nearby streets. Some of them are in better shape than others. Some of them are small, and really what we're talking about is dressing them up, public art and lighting. Others, like Exchange Plaza, I just mentioned, would be an opportunity for those outdoor stalls or those permanent stalls for smaller businesses. But what about for something like Market Plaza to think of that as a lawn that would support downtown residents? Either a dog park, playground, you name it, something that becomes really residentially focused and recognizes that people want someplace to go close to where they live. So we've included a number of recommendations here. Some of them recognize some of these kinds of conditions. We've pointed this out to a number of people. If you're coming to the convention center for the first time and you want to walk to City Plaza and Fayetteville Street, this is the view that you have. And so ideally, we'd like to really think about what that experience is coming to Raleigh and think about how we can reposition and rethink the look and feel of some of these connections so that it is more welcoming day and night. And then with respect to City Plaza, we have a real opportunity. So some of them are policy oriented. And the first one is really about how we think about big events. If there is a refrain I've heard from quite a few businesses, is that when there's a really big event on Fayetteville Street, a lot of those businesses don't necessarily feel included. And part of that, bless you, is a design issue. If you move your tents into the street for a big event and the back of your tents back up to the front door of the businesses won't feel included. So our simple solution would be to try to line up the tents in the middle of the street where people walk around them, and therefore the businesses are engaged, but so are the tents that are there for the event. So it's a relatively simple tweak. This is a picture from downtown Fort Worth, which does this really effectively. And it really has helped to make the businesses feel a better part of those existing events and more worthwhile for them to remain open when they're there. The big thing with Fayetteville is thinking about events. So we have the big events, which it works really well for. One of the members of our team said that Fayetteville effectively acts like an outdoor white box space, right? So like a private theater or white box space, it's easy to come in, you plug in, you do your bigger event, and then you're out. What we're interested in are the day-to-day events. How do we activate the plaza more on a daily basis and a weekly basis? Because in between events, it can feel a little empty. Some of this has to do with how we think about also the tenanting of what's on the plaza. So right now we have 4 glass boxes. Each of them have a different tenant. It'd be good to think about re-tenanting these over time. So if we're thinking about as Fayetteville Street as sort of North Carolina's Main Street, shouldn't these glass boxes reflect some of that as well? So whether we're thinking about restaurant concepts that have outdoor seating that's covered, or we're thinking about extensions of local museums that occupy one of those boxes, or we're thinking about places to rent a bike or a scooter if you're a downtown visitor. These would all be great locations for that. Obviously, Highwoods controls these glass boxes, and ultimately this is their decision. We are really hopeful that we can think differently about how the tenanting around the plaza works so that it benefits their bottom line, but more importantly, benefits the plaza and the experience that people would have coming to the city. And with that, we think carefully about heat. Both of these pictures were taken with we have a little heat camera. And we obviously did this in the summer. So you can see the difference between a Moore Square and a city plaza and how much hotter it feels, all right, on that surface. And so for it to really be a welcoming space on a day-to-day basis, we have to be able to bring in more shade and more comfort. So some of the things that we have to think about are physical here with respect to City Plaza. So this is a view of City Plaza today. And one of the things we run into is that if we wanted to do day-to-day programming, whether it's pickleball or it's yoga or it's just a picnic or even just a kids activity, all of those dotted red areas are really hard to program because they're either too close to traffic, they're too close to an entrance to a building, or there's a planter in the way. And so like our approach with Fayetteville Street, part of what we're thinking is there an opportunity to remove some select pieces of this plaza, very select, and create a more permanent space for day-to-day programming to bring in more shade that would support those glass boxes and even bring in something that's public art in the street that would help to really solidify this idea of Fayetteville and how it's so critical to North Carolina. So this is just one illustrative example of a way to do that. Again, we're thinking critically about finding space for us to then program and activate on a regular basis. The 9th recommendation here is about Raleigh Arts and Entertainment District. So right now we have a lot of investment going into a convention center expansion, right? And other improvements around that expansion that are really, really critical to the future of Raleigh. This is really about protecting your investment. We want folks to come to a convention or to a concert and stay and walk around and experience downtown. So a lot of what we talk about here as a concept is what's loosely called eatertainment. So it's basically like a place that you would go and play putt-putt and also get some dinner, right? You could see this as a draw for families, which picks up on the family-friendly piece of what we're after. But you could also see this is a draw for conventions, where right now some folks that come to conventions don't stay around the downtown core, they go elsewhere for their nighttime entertainment. So we're thinking through a number of different ideas. We have to get a handle on that last block between City Plaza and down to South Street, right in front of the Marriott. We really want to make sure we're bringing in some of the elements we've talked about elsewhere to that block so that it feels greener and more connected to the rest of the street. We want to think about entertainment concepts, but we also want to do some basic things. We have to designate pickup and drop-off zones. Whenever you're dealing with an entertainment district like this, there are real policy considerations. How do people get there? How do they leave? How do you manage some of that traffic? And how do you support existing hotels and businesses that really need that kind of traffic? All right, and lastly, one of the things that we've heard frequently is about the importance of connections, particularly connections to Dix Park. And so at this stage, what we've done is just kind of tee up a few ideas, but at this point, really what we're talking about is a large, bold connection, right? Dix Park is a massive investment that is going to be really transformative for the city. The downtown core is less than a mile away, but it feels so much further. So we think there are opportunities to really explore a range of options for how we would make that connection. All that we're saying at this first stage of work is to acknowledge the fact that we hear you. A lot of people have talked about this connection. We agree. I think as we move forward into the remainder of the study, we can start to put a little bit more detail on what those types of connections could be. There are some short-term things we can do. I'd mentioned the South Park Heritage Walk, the Chavez Dix Strollway. Those things are really important. Those are on-street connections. They're already in process. Let's continue to support them because in the short term, that's the best way to make a connection. But in terms of making a bigger connection, something that's visible, that's really important for us. And even you've already demonstrated the commitment to taking out some of the freeway aspects of other streets, right? Whether that's the on and off ramps for certain intersections, that would be an opportunity around Western Boulevard to rethink in the context of this idea, a connection. All right. With all of this, these are just some examples of other connections and other spaces that we think have some good things to think about, whether it's the short term, just do something now connection, or the longer term, like let's create a whole dedicated trail or space that makes this kind of connection to Dix Park. So I went through all of those relatively quickly, I hope. What the end of the report does is it identifies a number of actions we can take in the first 100 days. So how do we get things rolling, assuming there's support and agreement that these items are the right things to be thinking about. And then the report also includes what could we do in the first year. These are temporary measures. The end result of this entire project, after we get to the other aspects of the work that we're doing around office, MBE, those other aspects, is to have a more detailed action strategy that does identify catalytic projects. Right? These are the things we really need to do. This is how much they can cost. This is when we should get started. So all of that work is coming, but we didn't want to hold this back because I know there's lots of folks that are interested in getting moving on different aspects of this, depending upon their background and what they're really hopeful for with downtown. So I think with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Great
I can go back to
presentation. Thank you.
anything. Thank you.
Councilmember Fort.
It's probably more of a statement. Thank you for the presentation. And I know you've alluded to this in your report and in your conversation today. But one of the things I will say is, having conversations with business owners who are on Wilmington Street. Actually had a conversation with some of those folks yesterday, feeling quite alienated by this process. Understanding that, it's a more global approach to the downtown area, but I think the thought process is it feels, heavily concentrated on Fayetteville Street, and folks that will kind of be tied into this don't feel like they've had an opportunity to be brought into the conversation. And so there's a lot of frustration with folks in other parts of the corridor. I know that's going to be some ongoing work, but I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention because I think, titling it a Fayetteville Street, endeavor is kind of turning off some folks who you're going to probably need some buy-in from later on. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, and I understand. And so thank you for sharing that, because I think there's so much of this work that actually does pertain to Wilmington and Hargett and Martin and those surrounding streets. The two recommendations where we're specifically talking about Fayetteville, the streetscape design and the city plaza, those are the splashier graphics that are getting more attention. But I think there's a lot of work here that is really, really critical for those side streets, and we're happy to reach out and have more conversations about what the ways in which some of these ideas, both physical ideas and policies, can be applied to the physical aspects of those streets, because that's really important to consider. So I appreciate that.
Could you talk a little bit about the phases of this study? Because I think that could be
The
helpful
phases?
too.
Yeah. So I'll go back to this first one. So this first phase was front-loaded to really focus on Fayetteville Street and surrounding streets, but also a retail strategy for Fayetteville and those surrounding streets. That is the first piece of this work, and that's what we're sharing currently. As I mentioned before, the office market, these other aspects are coming later. In the context of that work, I think there's a number of important things that need to happen. One is a refinement of these ideas and make sure that we are capturing particularly comments like those, that we can integrate that into the future versions of this work. I think there's a lot of detail to add about how this actually gets done. And we already mentioned, how do we operationalize some of these ideas? And then there's broader strategies that need to be developed for all of downtown. So we haven't talked about Warehouse District or Glenwood South or other areas yet, because that is in the context of some of this other work. Mayor, does that answer the question?
Yeah, the one district or street I'm really concerned about is Wilmington Street.
Okay.
And so somehow or other, having some more attention on that
Okay.
would be helpful. You know, you did a lot with Market Exchange Plaza too, and that connects all of that. But, you know, I mean, Bill will tell you that that's been a real focus in terms of safety and whatnot, but it is all connected, and I see that, but probably that would be an area for some more.
I agree, and it really is a unique challenge. I mean, Wilmington Street has tiny sidewalks in comparison, and some business owners have really done a great job of working on their businesses, their facades, but not all of them have, right? So it's kind of a hit or miss kind of experience on Wilmington, and there's just limited space in order for us to work. That's a good design challenge for us. So that is what we should be focusing on going forward.
Okay. Councilmember Melton?
Wanted to add a few things. I was looking through the full presentation, not just the slides that we had. And one thing in there about the public bathrooms, I think would be really important. I mean, I have personally been in a situation where I was at an establishment that did not have a public restroom. I was like, where am I going to go? And, you know, I have the ability to go home or somewhere else. And so I think that's really important. I appreciate the phased approach to this plan, not just the future phases that will come to us, but even in this document. Things like getting our underutilized spaces converted to housing is something that I have really been pushing for a long time, and I know that will take a while. But some of this interim design work, just the slides you had where we saw how gray Fayetteville Street looks compared to the colorful, inviting atmosphere in some other areas. I mean, that is stuff that we can start moving on. To the point about Wilmington Street, I agree, and I see that as being a necessary sort of artery connecting the plans or the ideas for City Market to Fayetteville Street, because you have to go through Wilmington Street. And so it shouldn't just be a thoroughfare, it should be another place where you are stopping at those businesses and you feel inviting. And some of the stuff that was mentioned in here, and the mayor touched on this, but about these signature gateways is what I think you referred to them as. They do feel very barren right now, and some of them you don't even realize you can use to get over to other parts of downtown. And so making them more inviting may help naturally funnel more folks to other establishments that are up and going. But, you know, sitting here and listening to the presentation, I was getting very anxious and excited because I want to get moving on all of this. And so, you know, whatever we can do or I can do to be supportive, I love all of these ideas. A couple other things I want to flag. on slide 9, talking about being very intentional to recruit some nationally recognized establishments that are seeking expansion opportunities. There's not like a big sports bar or anything on Fayetteville Street. If you wanted to go watch a hockey game or a state game or Carolina or Duke game, where are you really going to go? And I have seen folks take pictures from the Marriott or the other hotel that was built with the convention center from their hotel rooms down to City Plaza, and they've tagged us or tagged Raleigh and been like, it's dead over here. And that's embarrassing for folks that are coming in from out of town, that our main street is gray and barren, and if you want to go watch a football game, I guess you got to go over to Glenwood South. And so I think some of those shifts would be really, really important. The big North Carolina art in the street, even that, hopefully people at least take a picture of that and be like, look how cool this is. Like, we can just start chipping away at this perception that it's a corridor that has no identity and doesn't have much activity. And so I think we need to get moving on the big pieces, and then these interim pieces, just the built environment, I think we should get moving on as quickly as possible.
Well, to follow up on that too, we purchased a portable TV. So it's like we take it to Moore Square, we show movies, whatnot. I think what we originally discussed in EDI was how do we use that to activate the plaza? So I think to follow up on that, that's something we need to do. But one thing I did want to mention, I think one of the most fun things I participated in when I first got on city council, which was now many years ago, we did something called the Big Ideas Forum. And I could not believe we had it at a bar, which everybody was like, what? We're having a public event at a bar? It was at Tiernanog, which is no longer there. But we had over 75 people show up, and it was people who normally don't come out and speak. And we did drawings, and, it was like everybody was really into it. And I still have the book from that on my desk. Some great ideas came out of that. And when we start talking about these catalytic projects, I would love to see us do something like that again. Talk about, bring those big ideas forward, because people had great ideas. A lot of people think that downtown South was dreamed up by Kane Realty. It was not. It was 2007 or 8. That's when people who were just in the audience came up with these ideas. So I think that would be a great deal of fun, but also engage people who normally don't engage and do it differently. So that would be one recommendation I have.
Great. I understand. You'll be pleased to know that was one of the first documents we also read when we started this work. So it's
Awesome.
It's still around.
Yeah.
Love to see
I
it.
still have my copy. Councilmember Patton, then Black.
Awesome. Thanks for the presentation. I wanted to put an exclamation mark on the kid-friendly
Yes.
element of it. I love the idea of making that map, that itinerary, but making it real visible and real physical, almost like a trail might have blaze markers. I don't memorize every trail I go on. I just look for the next orange diamond in front of me, and I can envision something similar to that. I'm raising a family here and would love to sort of send my kid down with grandma without having to really map out, you're gonna go here, and you're gonna go here, and you're gonna go here. And I think a lot of families come to downtown, do their activity, and then they leave. They go to Marbles and then they get out. So I really wanted to kind of put an exclamation mark on that, especially as we see the average age of Raleigh going down. We know people are moving here to raise families, so I think that's a really important component of our constituency. My other comment for you, so I represent part of the city where you had the 2% participation. My district does not touch downtown, and so I suspect I might have some constituents watching at home who are saying, why would we invest in downtown? That doesn't help me. So what would your answer be to our residents who help our residents understand why it's important for us to have a thriving downtown, even if you don't live in downtown?
Oh, man, that's great. Thank you. Great cities are not great without a great downtown. That's always my simple answer. Sometimes that feels, for some folks, look, I never go downtown. Why does it matter? But downtown is what helps to drive the economy. What helps to drive creativity, provide opportunities for all kinds of businesses. So that is central to this. I can't think of a single city that's flourishing without a flourishing downtown. So it's always critical to invest in that resource and that amenity. And we're always looking for, of course, other opportunities for people to give us their input. So I suspect we get quite a good input, right? If we do some deliberate outreach.
One thing Mitchell Silver always used to say when he was director of planning, Ken Bowers might remember the numbers better than I do, but he would make a comparison. He would say, this is why we invest in downtown. It helps keep your taxes low. And for instance, then the Wachovia Tower, now Wells Fargo, paid as much in taxes on one city block as 150 single-family homes. And it was like, that's why we invest in downtown. I remember people looking at that going, okay, now I got it. Yeah. Councilmember Black?
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I thought this was a really great presentation. I guess I had a couple questions, and the first one is a clarifying question. So in the phases, is it focusing in on the Fayetteville Street corridor, and then the other phases are going to be looking at other areas of downtown?
Yeah, that's the idea, is to really focus the initial work on Fayetteville and surrounding streets, and through that lens, look at the challenge, because we can't just look at Fayetteville as a physical challenge. We have to also think about what's happening in those storefronts. So some of that retail work was then also front-loaded, but specific to the core of downtown.
Thank you. To Mayor Pro Tem Melton's point, I really like the point about public restrooms specifically as a write-in answer for something that people would like to see, because I too have been downtown and in a tight and didn't have a place to go to the bathroom, and it can be, with the different sorts of community members that we have here, people experiencing homelessness. I think this is a point I brought up previously when we'd had conversations with DRA about like public restrooms. So that's good to see, and I would love to see that incorporated more into like the considerations you have. I also really liked the use of the really large sidewalks in Fayetteville Street. As many people know, I got the opportunity to go to Germany with Councilor Harrison. Councilor Harrison over the summer, and one of the things that I really
Next time you might want to advocate for somebody else who will remember your name. We're
Right.
cool. That's funny.
right. But one of the things I really enjoyed was just like the really active uses of their really big sidewalks. So I really enjoyed seeing that sort of understanding, repositioning some of the like planters that we have, so that we can like really activate the streetscapes. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was the one about the historic Black businesses in Raleigh, because we don't really have a lot of Black businesses in Raleigh. So one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I would love to hear more about the thoughts on this. Let me pull up the slide. You talked about permanent stalls or like little tiny pocket stores.
Yeah.
To like bring businesses of color into that area. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to do my best Bobby imitation here, because this was something that really is his brainchild. But part of what he's seen in some other cities, and in New Orleans has done this, is that they created a design for a number of permanent stalls within a location, and then the operation of those stalls becomes an opportunity to like lease those to small, growing businesses of color. So that is like how that's, because it's space you control as a city, that becomes an opportunity to achieve some of the goals that would come out of this work. So the stalls are small, right? Again, it's for certain merchants. We can open that up to as much as different kinds of activity as we're willing to. But it's something that I think provides an opportunity that just does not exist elsewhere, right? Because if you really just need a small space, where would you go downtown?
Right.
Right.
I like that idea. Micro retail is what
Yep.
Yeah.
Melton said.
Thank you. You just summarized it better.
So the other question I had was around housing.
Yeah.
on and around Fayetteville Street. And I saw all the locations that we have housing, the proposed locations, and some of the additional housing opportunities. Are these like areas that are like vacant parking lots or like?
No, and I should put some major caveats on what we're calling housing opportunities. Some of them are parking lots, absolutely. The parking lot at the bottom of Fayetteville Street between Fayetteville and Wilmington, right across from where the Omni is proposed.
Lincoln Theater.
Yeah, that is certainly a parking lot. But there are other buildings on this that are currently active that we wanted to call out as an opportunity for, like, in the future, should they sell, they might be a good candidate for housing, but that, again, requires a lot of additional research. But we just didn't want to leave anything off the table. And some of what we talk about in this chapter, too, are city-owned parking garages.
Yes.
And if there's a city-owned parking garage that needs a lot of investment, our question would be, well, instead of just investing in it as a garage, maybe that's an opportunity to rethink that site entirely. You could include a garage and housing, or just do housing, like whatever's most appropriate for that specific site. But that's something we really wanted to encourage.
I was really thinking about this map juxtaposed to parking concerns around downtown because there's just not a whole lot of parking. And so that was one of the things I was thinking. So I know you were encouraging develop of parking lots that include housing. So I really like that idea. I wanted to hear more about it. And I'm curious to see what comes back from that idea because it's kind of like a twofer of housing and parking concerns, both street and like just parking garages. And the last point that I thought was interesting was number 10, create bold connections south of downtown. I think there's a really good opportunity here to do more storytelling of like historic neighborhoods that we've had in Raleigh, specifically like the Chavis Dick Strollway. I think that would be a great place to start telling some of that Fourth Ward story that I've been hearing a lot about from some of the community members who are like, when the redevelopment happened and the neighborhood kind of went away with redevelopment. It would be a great place to tell that story. So that was like the one thing I thought for that area. But I really like the idea of having these connecting, walkable spaces to be able to connect Dix Park to like more of the central parts of downtown. Because Dix Park, when you said it's a mile away, I'm like, is it really that close? It does not feel that close at all because we have these really big, basically highways that are separating like downtown from the park. But I also think there would be a really good opportunity to do storytelling of like the historic parts of Raleigh and the Fourth Ward community. It was something that like popped into my mind immediately. Other than that, I thought it was a really great presentation, and I thank you.
Can I emphasize something really quickly on the story? I think this is a really important point because oftentimes when we think about like a big trail connection in a downtown, too often what happens is the trail connection becomes something that's more recreational and not cultural enough. And I think that's a good framing because I think that's the opportunity here, and it's something that the city's already doing with some of this work. And so the more that we can push that equal balance, right, connection, recreation, but also cultural and storytelling is the most successful, is how we become more successful. With you.
I just want to follow up on something that Councilmember Black said. Will, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, but Will, could you just stand up and just say hi to the council members? Will has opened up a new business. It's called Raleigh, Rolley. I don't know if you've been there, but it is amazing. And it's a boutique, it's an art studio, and yeah.
Fantastic. I haven't.
Yeah. But it is amazing what he's done. And just like part of the issue is it's next to scaffolding, so it kind of blocks some of the view. But he had a first Friday event. It was at last week. That was, the artwork was beyond belief. I mean, it made my heart happy. So I just want to acknowledge him for the work that he's doing and his team. Thank you so much, and keep it up. Thank you. We had Councilmember Branch, and then we had Councilmember Harrison, and then Councilmember Jones.
Definitely thank you for the presentation, the work. A couple things that I wanted to highlight and bring some attention to. One, when you talk about that downtown liaison, maybe we need to go back and re-look at, I thought DRA was our downtown liaison, so maybe we need to look at that and figure out what adjustments may need to be made there. So that businesses know who they can go to and things of that. So I think the system, at least on paper's there, and I think there's a lot of information that we got to get out to the public to try to help close some gaps. And if there are gaps, try to walk in to close them.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when we talked about downtown liaison, it was really specifically on the maintenance questions. And
Okay.
to your point, one of the things we do mention in the report is about doing kind of an internal audit, right? Like, we've identified the folks that are active. Let's talk about the ways that some of those things could change a little.
Okay. So I also, Evan, you got it. Also, mobile retail. We did a mobile retail policy, 4 years ago or so. Maybe it's a good time to revamp it or look at it in conjunction to what we're looking at as far as the overall connectivity of downtown. Because we set up a mobile retail policy to address mobile retail and to allow mobile retail downtown. So that's something that I wanted to highlight. When we talk about connectivity, I'm glad we brought up the streets where we talked about Wilmington Street, Blunt Street, and even let's not forget about Salisbury Street. So it is a whole unit of connectivity. If you're connecting your Davie and your Hargett streets, they're touching those streets, so that connectivity is heavily important. But in order for that connectivity to work, my question is, have we had any conversations with the state, especially NCDOT, because there's certain things they allow and don't allow, as well as have we even talked to the Department of Commerce about ways that they can help us help businesses?
Can I call on you for this? Talking with the state is on our list to do, so around a number of these recommendations. We are also very aware of what streets are state controlled versus not. And so that is something that always plays into the thinking, recognizing how much more difficult it can be when there's another layer of control over a certain street. Am I
There's
missing
also
anything?
an empty DOT building sitting on Fayetteville Street. So
Right. Yeah, city got some as well.
Yeah, just to address that directly, we do have a couple meetings set up with the state to get real specific on where we can work together in partnership with both the campus downtown as well as some of those policy areas.
Okay, don't leave yet, because I got one more form of government. One of the housing opportunities that you pointed at was actually a Wake County building. So the county has buildings downtown as well. Has there been any conversation about that and activation that they can be included as part of, and possibly also help finance?
But we did have a conversation with Wake County. They did put some investment in that building, is my understanding. So they're not looking to move anytime soon. But this is where I wanted to put the huge caveat over opportunity, which we wanted to identify that should they decide at some point in the future that they are going to switch up some of the locations of where folks are working, then we want to make sure that we've at least identified this as something that could benefit downtown if that transition occurs.
Okay. Yeah, definitely thank you. I think with the continued outreach and communication with those that are downtown and those that are interested in looking downtown, I think the opportunities are all out there. We just got to figure out who's on first and how we prioritize things.
Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation and all the ideas. Just wanted to second a few of these. Public bathrooms, yes, we've talked about that a number of times. I think we need to figure out a path forward. Reducing urban heat islands. I mean, when I think about why I wouldn't go downtown in the summer, I mean, that is why. So we have got to work on that as much as possible. I love the focus on thinking about kids from, playgrounds, nature play, flexible play places, but also for adults. Adults like to have fun too. And if we can do that in a way that integrates, people of all ages. I love that example in the report from Monroe Street Midway in Detroit. That looks so cool. This activation of just a parking lot with all this painted kind of lines showing you what you could do, what you could play there, whether I think they've got basketball or roller skating, bumper cars, fire pits, but it's really just painted lines that kind of tell you this is what you would do in this little corner of the parking lot. And, that it could be that simple and something that can adjust and be creative and flexible. I also would recommend, with some of the pop-up ideas, continuing to think about music and the role that music plays downtown Raleigh. I always feel like that could be amped up. And when it comes to wayfinding, if there's a way to indicate, a number of different kinds of assets that we have with a similar look, like here you're all of a sudden on the path to go to Black businesses and Black historic districts, like the Fourth Ward. Now you're on the path for kids activities, family-friendly activities. Now you're on the music and art path, and sometimes they all intersect. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and then using those stalls kind of as the in-between so you don't get tired of the path you're on because there's nothing to do all of a sudden. So anyway, thank you for the ideas. I'm excited to see where we move this forward and how.
One of our colleagues did ask early on, how come I don't hear any music? And so that point about music is something that we've been talking about as well.
Christine. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you so much. I just had a few questions, highlight all of the great things. I think the other counselors have done a great job of highlighting the great stuff. And I just had some questions about parking, lighting, and then Black-owned businesses and what we're doing for that. So the first one is when you talked about 2-hour free validated parking in city garages, have you guys looked into how much that would take away from what our current revenue is in that, and how much we would be sacrificing there?
No, not yet.
Okay.
And this is something that's going to require refinement, right? Because I think there are spaces, particularly in this day and age, that go unused in downtown. And so me as the pragmatist look at it and go, well, how do we get those spaces used more frequently? And for the percentage of people that don't come downtown, right or wrong, because they believe there's no parking or they're concerned about parking, that's what goes through our head, is how do we expand that customer base and make it welcoming for them? We haven't gotten into the revenue question.
Okay. All right, cool. I was just thinking, how are we tracking to see, okay, if they stay for 4 hours? Because right now it's mainly an hour or two. And if we're going to give up all that revenue, I'm hoping that you're saying, we're going to keep them longer and have them spend more money, but where? So I get where you're going with it, but I just had that question. The second one is lighting. When you showed that amazing picture of the business that's lit up, would that be the business having to invest in their own, or would this be the city investing in that to make that lighting happen?
So typically, there's a few ways you can do this. Looking at this image, so anything that's in the public right-of-way is really on the city and partners to do. What typically happens in downtowns around building lighting is that it's either on the property owner to begin to do that work on their own. The ways that cities can help is to either bring on a lighting designer to make that process easy, because a lot of the inertia that prevents folks from doing the things that they know would make their building look better is, I don't know how to get started, I don't know what it's going to cost, I don't know who to talk to. So as much as we can remove some of those barriers, that becomes a way of assisting the property owners that want to do this to do it.
Sure, and I think because in the Safe Vibrant committee, we've been talking about lighting, but ours was mainly in where the city can control that on the street. So this is beautiful, but I was like, that doesn't look like something the city would control, but I see where you're going with that. Makes complete sense. Thank you. And then the last question, I think this is more for Bill. As we're talking about Black-owned businesses, because I really think that is vital to keep going, I'm wondering, as the DRA, what are you doing for those businesses that don't last? Because I know over on Hargett Street, Johnny Hackett's, he's right on the corner, I don't remember if it's Salisbury or something, that he's not there anymore. And so I'm wondering what is currently being done to maintain, not just attract, but maintain the businesses, especially the Black-owned businesses that are currently there.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've got a few different things and initiatives going. Part of what we do is when a business opens, we have our upfit grants, right? So obviously that's a part of attracting a business. But the reason we do upfit, for one, it's the way you can legally give a grant in the state, but also it defrays some of their early costs. So the theory is you defray some of that, so then their debt is lower, so they can invest instead in their business. So we're trying to free up that stuff so you have less money invested in your flooring and all of that, so that you can put it into marketing and other things. We do marketing promotions. So right now, obviously, it's Black History Month, so we're featuring Black-owned businesses throughout our social media and our newsletters every week. We've also aggregated all the Black-owned businesses on the storefront level into a blog. So if people want to support Black-owned businesses, we've got an easy resource, and then we send that to news media. It's also in our newsletter as well to try to support that as well. Having said that, I think there's still a lot more opportunities, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunities for coordinated marketing, for events that knit them together, and for telling that story as well. So I think, we've got a good start, but I wouldn't declare victory yet. I think there's a lot more that could be done.
Thank you.
Councilmember Black?
Follow-up question that I forgot to ask the first time. So I saw one of the things listed on how can you make Fayetteville Street more vibrant is pedestrianize Fayetteville Street. Is that something you guys are looking into?
No, sorry. No, that was one of, so when we shared all of these, we shared a number of ideas that we wanted people to weigh in on. I mentioned what's dotted here were write-in answers. So those weren't things we shared, but we always offer the opportunity, hey, something missing? Tell us what you think. There was quite a debate online with folks that were participating. Some really wanted to pedestrianize it, some really didn't. There was lots of back and forth. What does that really mean? It's part of the engagement process that's helpful because we can understand where those ideas are coming from, right? Do they want to pedestrianize the street because they're worried about pedestrian safety, or they just want more space to be able to do the kinds of programming we're talking about? So that's where that comes from, is like literally we just pulled it from the online survey.
Right. I thought I saw it represented in the presentation, but then I was like, when I asked people about it at the city, they were like, So I didn't know. I know there were some challenges or some thoughts and feelings around it. And if it was something you were looking into, I wanted to understand like what the challenges were. But if it's not, then I have no more questions.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I just wanted to emphasize too, the kid-friendly amenities and the itinerary and the route really resonated with me. I think that is a great idea. I love the mobile retail. It wasn't 4 years ago we formed a mobile retail thing. We did that much earlier. It was very conservative. And the whole idea was trying to keep mobile retail away. 4 years ago, we modified it, but we need more work in that area. There's some really cool things that could be done, and we can't do them. And also, when we look at our Fayetteville Street design standards, that also prevents us from doing certain things. So I think that we need to look at that holistically, update, and just kind of say, hey, things have changed a lot since the street was converted in, was it 2009 or 2007? And it's like, we've got to get with the trends here. So I'm really, I feel how Councilmember Melton did, I'm ready to go. This is really good stuff, and we've had a lot of conversations around safety in our downtown. I mean, creating this great public realm improves safety. It improves the business climate. It makes people want to live here. It makes people want to come here. So I'm ready. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much for your time and attention on this. I know you guys have a lot to think about and to cover in a big, complex city, but we really appreciate the thought and attention to downtown. Downtown is a really important part of this city. As Scott said, we can't have a great city without a great downtown. It's also, this public realm is where we come together as a community, right? So it's unique, it's not privately controlled, it's a collection and a community of stakeholders and people, and so it's a really unique opportunity for us. So it's an important part of our city. It's a complex and unique part of our city, but it's something we feel is worthy of additional investment and attention. So thank you guys for that. I would encourage if possible. This is a lot, obviously. There's a lot of policy here and there's a lot of investment. Obviously, there are some things that partners can get going soon. There are some things that I think are already in progress in many ways, but there's a lot of policy and investment here. So I would encourage some path forward if that's a committee approach, but I would encourage you all to identify that so we can keep this moving. If I had to identify one shortcoming of the downtown experience plan, didn't have any path forward. Council saw it once, never saw it again. And therefore, a lot of things didn't happen from it that could have happened.
Councilmember Melton.
Yeah, I mean, we can take this into EDI. What I wouldn't want to have happen is it comes to EDI and it stalls. So what I would hope is that work is continuing on the stuff, and then we can just do regular check-ins at EDI, which provides, I think, a bit more of a touch point than having to come back to a full council agenda.
Could we maybe look at in EDI setting some priorities? So like you said, your 100-day plan and this whatnot, maybe what we can look at there is priorities, but also funding.
Yeah, let's figure out deliverables and then get them moving. So we can do that. We don't have nothing on the agenda, so.
Okay. Councilmember Jones.
Quick question. So this was the first phase. How many phases are there? And would this begin after all phases have been presented, or you want this like now?
So the plan is the next 3 chapters will come together. That'll come to you this summer. And so I don't think we have an exact date figured, but you'd get the rest of the 3. So we're not going to keep doing work sessions for each chapter. Our intention would be the remaining chapters are going to come in one package here in the summertime. But the intention of bringing this work forward is some of it could move now. So ultimately, it's you all's decision, but we think there's a lot here that could move immediately. So the intention was to bring this forward now, given that you are in budget cycle, but also the urgency to get the downtown core back up and running.
And maybe are these the 10 points that you think can be delivered now, or are you saying within those 10 points there are smaller deliverables?
Correct. Yeah, within them, each of them, there are deliverables that could get moving now. Some of these would take quite a bit of time as well.
Is there a list of all the things that you think can get done really quickly?
I think we certainly have an in-development and action plan that we could develop that with, yeah.
And at the end of the document we shared, particularly the first year, this is what we could do in the first year. These are elements of each of these 10 ideas that we would see as kind of the necessary first steps, how we get going. Because even
Taking
things
the
that
first
take
100 days and seeing like those are the got it.
Exactly, because even the things that take a long time, we can get started now, right,
it.
and
Thank
start
you.
that runway towards seeing the action.
Councilmember Melton, would you see this coming back to EDI on the 27th of February?
We don't have anything else, so sure.
Okay, just so people in the audience know, that meeting is at 1:30?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 1:30. And so if any of you would like to come, that's when we do have discussions about topics and get your input as well. But if you just want to announce that that's when the meeting would be held.
Yes, it would be 1:30 on February 27th in the Raleigh City Council chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Just checking, is that enough time for staff? And do y'all have enough clarity on what needs to be brought to that committee?
So yes, so basically I just envision this being an initial conversation and kind of setting some priorities. So I don't think there's any additional legwork for staff to do at this time. Because all of this will have a budgetary impact, so we'll have to phase and plan that as we do our FY25 budget deliberation.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate, I know a lot of time, effort, energy, and outreach went into this. So thank you for the work, the great ideas, and yeah, ready to go.
Thank you.
All right, we are now adjourned.